So are we like doing
So,
it?
welcome once
Oh,
again. Here we are inside Movies Galore with the crew. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
eh.
Hi.
Hello.
So, Celeste, since you haven't been with us for a while, why don't you give us a lowdown on what the movie was that we watched this week?
Some of
All
us
right.
watched it just barely before this episode.
We watched
Slackers.
the
Yeah.
1987 movie Street Trash.
Yay.
Okay.
I couldn't
And
remember the year it was from.
what was it about? Tell us a little bit of a lowdown of what the film basically entailed.
I should totally think we should have Katie tell this.
Yeah, good.
I
All
can
right,
barely
Katie.
contain my excitement about this movie.
Yeah,
I get
Do
so
it.
excited when we do my favorite movies.
You've been
Okay.
called, so why
All
don't you
right.
tell us what the movie is about?
So Street Trash, let's see.
please tell me what it's about.
We're basically following the story of these two brothers who are like runaways, and they're living in the junkyard, which is so awesome. How can it not be, right? They live in the junkyard, and the one brother, Fred, stumbles on the local liquor store guy, finds this. Well, this guy stumbles on in the basement of his liquor store a crate of like really old bottles of Tenafly Viper that have been like alchemized. You know, it's like a cheap bottle of hooch that's been sitting for so long that it's alchemized, and so he throws it out for like $1 a bottle, and all the neighborhood bums are buying it, and when they drink it, basically it melts them right where they stand. So the story kind of follows the runaway brothers and what they're doing, and kind of all of this cast of characters that live in the junkyard, and the hierarchy of all of that, and all of the chaos that ensues when they get their hands on this Viper that's killing everyone.
And when did you first see the film?
Oh, it's been some years. I can't remember when I first saw it, but it was one that I hadn't really heard much about. And I think it was recommended that I watch it by Jack, the guitar player from Rat Bat Spider, because he really likes the movie, and he told me to watch it, and I watched it. And I typically like all of the movies that he's really enthusiastic about. So I really enjoyed it then for a lot of reasons, but specifically the setting, the junkyard setting. I've always been enamored with junkyards ever since I was a kid. And just how, like, I actually watched the bonus features on the Blu-ray, and they talk about how almost the entire movie was storyboarded to get ideas. So they had, to figure out what the characters were going to look like and what the scenes were going to look like. And I really liked that aspect of the movie, like the artistic vision. I totally see it with just the characters, the way they look, the setting, like the tire hut is so awesome where they live inside of there, and yeah, I just really like the bright colors too. It's not something that you see in a lot of horror movies, especially in death scenes. You don't see a lot of bright blues and yellows and oranges, so I like that a lot.
Okay.
These awful people turn into something pretty when they die.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about, was this your first time watch?
Yes, I had been curious about it. I'd heard of it by reputation, but I had never seen it. I even was close to buying it. I'm probably not going to now. But in a way, it reminded me of a movie by Akira Kurosawa called Doskaden, which also, by the way, takes place in a junkyard. And has a similar message about society. This one, I was taken aback by the fact that it was one of those movies where I had difficulty liking any of the characters. But it reminded me of a trauma movie on the surface, but looking at it from a deeper way, which I watched it twice throughout the week because I wanted to make sure whenever I get a strong feeling like that, I like to make sure I watch it again because I don't want to, give it a bad run unless I've seen it multiple times. And I'll admit, second time I watched it right after I watched La La Land, and that was an interesting comparison.
Indeed.
But it reminded me of sort of like if Trauma did a take of Kurosawa's Doskeren.
Okay. Alrighty. And Celeste, was this a first time watch or was this a rewatch?
Kind of. I'd seen bits and pieces before, but I'd never sat down and watched the whole thing together. So a lot of it was familiar to me, but I hadn't just sat and watched it all. And I also thought a lot about Trauma when I was watching it. It reminded me of a Trauma movie. Very 80s, which I liked.
Okay.
Like bad acting, over the top.
Was there one particular scene that you could pick out that you enjoyed?
I really just enjoy the whole. I like in the beginning when he first drinks that stuff. Obviously, that's like a classic scene from that movie.
Okay. Dustin, why don't you tell us? Was this a first time watch or was this a rewatch?
Well, it's a somewhat complex story. So, in one of my movie buying escapades, I bought a couple things from somebody online, and they arrived damaged. And so the guy was like, next time I'll do something really special for you to make it up to you. And so he let me go through. Next time he was going to sell stuff, he let me see everything he had in advance. And then he threw in 2 free movies. And one of those movies was Street Trash. And so I saw it for the first time somewhere last fall. I had heard a lot about it, and I didn't really hear what it was about. Like, I just knew it involved people melting from liquor. And while it's a pretty gross movie, it's strangely watchable. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it to people, at least if I didn't already really know them. But it was pretty good, and especially with the melting, like that was pretty cool. Like Katie mentioned earlier, like the death scenes were extremely colorful and different. My main thing is I wish that the Viper had more of a role in like driving the plot. Like, to me, it felt like the Viper was almost incidental. Like, it didn't really move the events along. Like, it was just kind of there. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a hard movie to classify because it's just like the sleazy '80s thing, but that was intentional. Because I watched all those special features too, and goddamn, there were a lot of them.
Dane, why don't you tell us? Was this your first time watch, or was this a rewatch for you?
It was a first time watch. I had heard about it. A friend recommended it to me, and I'll be honest, I didn't really like this movie. Like, I didn't hate it or anything. Like, there's plenty about it to admire, like we mentioned with the practical effects melting, the fact that they were, very colorful, very well done, all that kind of stuff. Just really, to me, and like people have compared it to Trauma, which on a purely surface level stylistic way, on that kind of analysis, I can get it. But the problem is that it reminded me of Combat Shock mixed with Class of Nukem High, except that in both of those instances, it has all the kind of over-the-top death and squalor and all that, but it actually has a point to it all in both of those movies, or at the very least, I think it was done in a more entertaining way. And especially like with Combat Shock, like that, and you can see some of that in here with like the Vietnam vet who's scarred and everything. You can see some of that in from Combat Shock in here, but it really just kind of felt like they were wanting to imitate Trauma's style it's a little bit like what people think trauma movies are, is just gross effects and just trashiness and just this and that's it. Except that the best trauma movies are those things, but they are trying to
So
say
you think
something.
so you think that this film is possibly intentionally acting like a Toma film?
Well, by this point, The Toxic Avenger had come out, Class of Nukem High had come out, Combat Shock had come out.
I'd
You know,
come out.
what did come out? Oh, you came out? Okay.
Hmm.
Well, the thing is, like, all these other movies had been released by that time, so you can clearly see the influences there. And I just really didn't think that it had a lot to say. I think that you could easily have made it such that this was a more intelligent commentary about society and about like the degradation of society, and about
What the
the
fuck?
way that substances are used to placate the lower classes while destroying them from the inside out and all that stuff. And arguably you could read those kind of themes into this. It felt like they were like a couple steps away from getting there, but they just were concerned about making everything really gross and really sensational and over the top, but not really thinking about how to best make it effective, at least in my opinion. And on top of everything, I just found it really, really boring on a storytelling level. Again, like, it has good individual moments, but it just didn't really coalesce into anything that I would ever want to watch or watch again. And which again, I'm perfectly good with mindless fun if I am indeed enjoying watching it. And I don't know, it didn't work for me. But I can see why someone may like it. It didn't work for me because I've seen essentially what this film was trying to do. I saw it done better in films that came out before this film came out.
Well, I myself had come across this film, and I'd heard about it myself. Heard about the fact that it was basically where a bunch of homeless people end up drinking this fluid and they start to melt. Well, when I watched it the first time, I thought the effects were like really, really cool. Cool, and I'm into a lot of gorish type films, and that's what this is. This is a gore film. This isn't a horror film. This is a gore film. This was supposed to gross you out. Okay, and I think that's what. Oh, I mean, it's not a film for everyone. It's an art piece. It's
How
one
so?
of those films where it's not supposed to make sense. It was made as an abstract gore piece to me, and that's what I see in it, because the effects in it. I mean, come on, guy sitting on the toilet, he's getting sunk right into that fucking hole. He's literal. You're literally seeing this like green goo just ooze down the toilet seat, and it's like it's laughable and curious how they made the effects in that. I mean, and then not only is it are they supposed to be melting, one guy explodes. He doesn't just melt; he explodes. So all his innards come out. So it's not just a melting effect. It's an
Here's
explosive
the thing.
melting
It's like
effect.
it's a good way to test those effects. That's for sure, and they did a good job with them. It's just as far as like an abstract art piece, I really have to disagree with that, because I feel like if they were to do that, then why not just make an entire film of people dying in horrific ways and make it purely about that? Because this did attempt to have a story, and it
Because
attempted to
nothing
have
has to make sense. Nothing has to make sense,
Well, and
to be honest.
but that's my point. Is if nothing had to make sense, then they should have gone all the way with it, and literally not had anything have a semblance of a plot at all. So it. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily categorize it as that, because this really did attempt to have a story, uh, but I guess for me the big thing with it is that it really did kind of seem like well, for historical context, the 80s, I think, had a particular fascination with people melting or faces melting, because in heavy metal from 1981, they have a lot of melting. But in there, I mean, I'll talk about something not making sense completely and yet being a really, really great film for what it is. The difference there is that is meant to be almost like a long form music video, even more than anything else, and they're all kind of self-contained short stories and all that stuff, and so you're judging it on a different set of criteria than you are for something that's trying to be a completely cohesive piece, with like one story with a beginning, middle, and end. And so in that sense, you had face melting there, face body melting. You had melting there. You had plenty of melting in, trauma movies with some kind of toxic waste involved, like Toxic Avenger and Class of Nukem High. And then you have this.
Is that not only was the director a cinematographer later on, but he was also a cinematographer behind the film Titanic.
Really?
Yeah, later on down the road. So,
well, and that's one thing I would praise it for, is that they did have some pretty neat shots, like things coming at the camera, and things like, I like it whenever people can really think visually, and there were definitely some good little bits and pieces like that that I thought were good.
He also had some cinematography behind the movie The Abyss, some cinematography in True Lies, The Mighty Quinn, Crash. So
he stuck around James Cameron then.
But keep in mind, Cameron also did Piranha 2: The Spawning. So
he did. Well, and he also did James Cameron did a lot of art design and special effects for Roger Corman when he was first starting out. So
he likes to say he directed the best killer flying fish movie.
And yet, by the same token, he also considers The Terminator to be his first film, when it in fact was not. But the thing with the melting is, I do think that was a bit of a trope for the time, at least in a certain subset of horror. It wasn't like a hugely mega trope that we would always see, but it was definitely there. To me, it felt like they were trying to think of, let's figure out ways to make a lot of creative melting and visual effects, and then we'll craft a kind of sort of story around it.
That's actually not, I don't think, how it was set up originally.
No, probably not. That's just kind of the impression it gives me. But
the melting or exploding, or however the death scenes played out, were supposed to sort of lend themselves to the characters, so that each character sort of, their demise was in a different way, in association to their character.
Poetic
to some
justice.
Extent. Right. So yeah, I don't know. I thought it was, the way it was done was really creative. I can't think of, trying to think of other movies where people die in a similar fashion.
What's interesting is there are there are not that many films dealing with homeless people themselves, and one of them that I can think of that is in a similar style is Hobo with a Shotgun.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Definitely.
So when I was thinking of films that have something to that probably wouldn't have been able to have been done if not this movie paving the way for it, is Hobo with a Shotgun. And to me, that has a similar feel, similar style. It's just that
Totally
has
agree.
a little bit more of an underground city, so to speak, with a more hierarchy, And to me, this was like the beginnings of the grindhouse 80s style. This is more
I don't know.
grindhouse.
I would disagree there because I think that there are plenty of grindhouse films that had come out before that. Not to mention the fact that, as far as the whole
Well, the
homeless
grindhouse
people,
theme
urban
had sort of
squalor.
died after the late '70s, and then it was reborn in the '80s.
Well, the whole urban squalor thing. I mean, if you look at Combat Shock, which was like, I feel like, what was it, 84, 85? Or no, it might have been 86. Let me look that up. But the point is, it came out before that, and that was literal squalor. I mean, I'm sure that they shot 1984. I'm sure that they probably shot this one also in a kind of bombed out location. But like with Combat Shock, I remember that they were able to show the urban squalor thing earlier, and to me more effectively. It's a little bit like with Taxi. It's, to me, Combat Shock kind of reminded me of like if Taxi Driver was a film where the protagonist does not take out his anger outwardly as much as he takes it out on himself, and yeah, I feel like that. So in other words, it has a bit more to say about the effects of war and urban squalor and that kind of stuff. And it did really feel like the people here were trying to tell a story, but they put a lot of specific scenes ahead of, you know,
See, I really don't think that there was anything that they were trying to do here. They took a story of a group of homeless people who just ended up taking this liquid and started dying. And there was a detective that was involved in figuring out the case, and of course they decided to mix this Vietnam vet in with the whole story, along with the story with the runaways. And I guess the
well,
only
and
real
basically
hero-
what you amount to when you throw all that stuff in there without some kind of through line to connect it all is you get like a series of kind of random events with nothing really connecting them.
The
And
connection is the setting
They're all
where they all come together because the trials and tribulations of life have brought them all to this junkyard where that's the connecting thread. That people from all these different walks of life have ended up here, and their demise is contained within a bottle of liquor. I think it's actually kind of brilliant. It's sort of
it could be,
it's about the people on the street. Katie's right. Like that was the whole point that they had.
It could be, and yet, but it's also not. It's not do the right thing either. As far as like, that's a good example of how you can have like an ensemble cast full of all these little bit characters that are all essentially street people. They're not homeless, but they're not in great circumstances either.
I would argue.
I
would argue that this is a more coherent movie than Do the Right Thing, which I didn't quite understand or really enjoy as much as I enjoyed Street Trash.
I don't think that it takes itself as seriously, as a Spike Lee movie.
It's meant to have like a lighter tone.
Yeah,
totally.
They mentioned that repeatedly.
Yeah, it doesn't, but my point is light tone, heavy tone, is that again you can make a more cohesive piece while achieving all the various little things you want to achieve.
The thing
I
is,
didn't struggle with the cohesiveness as much. I don't think
you can't always pack every little single scene in a little tight little box. You can't have an entire. I mean, you could, but then that's what you'd expect. I'm thinking that the director actually made something different. So that yeah, okay, you have these main characters and whatnot. There's no real heroes because everybody's politically incorrect. You have all these characters because even goes a little bit overboard when he beats up the dude trying to scare the one bum. He's nobody in here is really a hero. And I think
which is fine. I don't know. It does, and to be fair, I'm okay with generally speaking, there have been cases where like I've been more okay with certain things not being as cohesive as others. I think what then has to happen is that, and this is very subjective, but it's more like, do you enjoy the experience despite that? You know, even though you acknowledge it's not as cohesive as it could be. Um, but in this case, I overall was just a little bored by it, but I did like certain individual moments. Like I did feel like towards the middle, one of the more gleefully absurd moments where I feel like they really kind of went all the way with the absurdity of what they were doing was the
What was it? The
a
fact that
certain
they were playing
it was
can with
a certain missing appendage that gets tossed around like keep away, and then juxtaposed with some implied necrophilia and that kind of thing. It was sort of like, well, in that instance, you're sort of like, okay, they're fully embracing the wackiness of just how absurd all this stuff is, and like, again, there are certain moments that do that, and like the chicken in the tucked in the guy's pants and that kind of stuff. Like it's like, okay, you're starting to embrace a little bit of the elements you've got at play here, and then other times it's like they're trying to get some kind of semi-serious bit communicated and it doesn't fully work. Yeah, but which is not to say it needed to be a straight farce necessarily, but it's like I felt like in a lot of ways it wasn't 100% certain of what it wanted to be, but other
And that's,
people
I
may
think, what I
disagree with
enjoyed
that.
about it. I
Yeah.
think, I mean, the rape scene, or where they're dragging her, the one girl out from the tire hut, you know, like that scene is really abrasive, really, like, especially as a woman. I mean, that scene it's hard to not cringe at that to some extent. And the actress does such a good job in that. And then she even talks about it in the bonus, how she actually was attacked in real life. So it was like a total flashback moment for her. So it wasn't even really that hard for her to get in character in that moment. So I felt like scenes like that were really powerful. But yet then you have the juxtaposition of the, you know, flying penis scene, you know, that how I thought that was done really well for me personally. Like, the highs and the lows. I think that's why I like the movie so much, because if it was all really serious, rough scenes, like everything so grim, yes, it would be terribly depressing movie. So I like that there was kind of that juxtaposition.
Which ties into what I said earlier about Do the Right Thing, where it was kind of the same. It's like, wow, everybody is awful. And then it's like, oh, I just feel bad now. Like, what was this supposed to accomplish?
Well, I tend to like, I don't know. I tend to like movies that make you feel depressed because I don't know. I usually don't get depressed by them because I know exactly what they're trying to do, and I am able to appreciate them a little easier, I guess, because I like the kind of serious nature of them. And I would argue that Do the Right Thing has some good little comedic moments in there but they don't break the tone of the movie, and that's sort of the big important thing is
no, it has like a dead serious bad tone.
I don't agree with that at all.
Brandon, is there any positive thing that you could possibly say about this film?
Well, one of the things I was going to say in the film's defense, as somebody who did not like it, but still I can understand, some films are more of a portrait and others are more of a landscape. I kept mentioning Doskadan, and I do think that if you haven't seen it, especially if you did like the movie overall, it's a good one to see. And if you want one with more of an artistic take, then that's definitely the best. It was done in 1970. But both that film and this film had one major similarity, other than people living in a dump. And that is, it wasn't really about the individual. It wasn't really about a strong central narrative, other than, you know, a message that was there to get across. It was a landscape painting. It was, this is the setting. And the film was about the setting. I don't even consider the plot about the killing of the bums as even a real plot point. I just consider that as a part of the background. That's just everyday life. It just happens to be a colorful part of everyday life. Instead of somebody getting their head bashed in or set on fire by somebody, it's they're getting their guts burned out by liquor. It's like that scene at the beginning where the guy.
So it could be a resounding message that alcohol is possibly what's killing
I think that's
the
in
everyday
there.
life
I think
of the
that's
homeless.
part of it.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Like, it's playing with elements that are good ones, as far as like the whole idea of life is a struggle. It's hard. An escape is substance abuse, and the substances that we are abusing to, anesthetize ourselves are killing us. Like that's essentially the elements that you have at play. And those are great ones, but it just I don't know. It was very kind of undecided about where the focus was, what the tone was.
Did anyone kind of laugh at the part where the fat guy ended up like on top of the Asian?
I thought it was funny. I thought it was funny for a moment when it's like, "Oh shit, did he die?" And it's like, "Well, I'm happy she's okay, but well, she might be stuck there for a while."
Just figured I'd ask. Celeste, is there anything that you can possibly add to this positive and or negativity?
I think it's interesting that people are so divided on this. I found it thoroughly enjoyable. I like it. I like how 80s it is. It actually reminded me of Trauma in a good way. I didn't see all those faults that Dane saw in it. I actually really enjoy the movie.
Yeah, well, it's not. I don't know if faults isn't necessarily the right word. It's just more. That was the impression I got from it, but I can see why other people would like it.
I mean,
Well, and Dane, I think the style of movies that you tend to like, this just doesn't fall into that. And I think you might be possibly looking for more than what is intended, or more than what was there, or that's what you're hoping for is more than.
Maybe. I mean, it depends. Like generally speaking, you're right.
I feel like this movie was a play on a lot of things. I mean, and you even said that, a play to certain things.
I think, Katie, part of the reason you like it is you're an artist and you're a very visual person. So something that's like visually stunning like this, it's going to grab your attention.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm a very visually oriented person too, and those elements that you mentioned did stick out to me as well. And yours was very color centric, which I also am very color centric. I think that they're like the certain cinematography bits about things, like I said, things coming at the camera were nice to see. I am hugely inspired by Kubrick as far as with him, it's all about perspective and about kind of deep space and kind of a very clear horizon line, vanishing point, that kind of stuff. So I'm with you on that as far as what artists can do with the visuals of a film. But you're right. Generally speaking, I do try to look for films that give me more in terms of deeper food for thought, but I can enjoy stuff that's not necessarily trying to be about anything. In this particular instance, I didn't really, mostly because I could see them trying to go for, potentially they had elements at play that I didn't feel like they fully utilized. That's all.
Strange to say, when I first saw this, I didn't like it at first either, but after seeing it a couple of times, I actually started to understand that it had more of an underlying message, and I think that's why I think I'm kind of on the same scope as Katie here with the scenery and the way of life being the message throughout the film. And I guess to me, when you watch a film, yes, you're looking for a storyline to follow. You're looking for a plot to follow. You're looking for something to catch your attention and keep your attention and enjoy the film throughout. Well, some films are not that way. and that's why I enjoy some of these discussions, because not everyone is going to enjoy the film, and sometimes you want to figure out why, and it's interesting to hear the different perspectives on why. Dustin, is there anything negative or positive that you can say about the film?
Well, I kind of want to reiterate, like, I didn't like it at first. It had to kind of grow on me. And it's something that I really didn't mind seeing again. Normally gross kind of effects like that really turn me off in a movie. But this time it was different. So, I mean, I'm happy I ended up getting it for free from that guy. Were a handful of things I thought we should probably mention. Like the guy, like, telling jokes. When the gangster's, like, girlfriend goes off with one of our main characters, and the guy who's, like, the doorman,
Yes.
like, shooting
That guy's awesome.
and then he's being, like, questioned again, like, at the police station, and he's like, everybody thinks he's Mr. Mafia, and he's just, like, mocking him, and it's like, we can't protect you all the time, right? It's like, yeah, you got that witness protection thing. No, we don't. And the Mafia guy's like, oh, you're dead. You're so dead.
Hope your mother's got a black dress. She's going to need it. That was all improv, the two of them, actually. That's what's extra awesome about that.
And the song at the end is pretty good, too.
Brooklyn
yes.
accent and a white guy.
How did everybody feel about, like, the cop character? Like, he was a kind of a scary guy.
It reminded me of, like, a football player.
I think he actually was a cop, because I saw those same extras as Katie, and, like, they had, like, a few features where it's like, oh yeah, let's go meet him now, and
And he's a born-again Christian, which threw me way off, too. I was like, what the hell?
Well, he was like he's like the scary born-again Christian. Like, he's like...
They're all scary to me, Dustin.
Well, I think he actually used to be a real cop. And
yeah.
like in his interview, he's talking about, it's like, we come here to kill devils. And it's like, oh, okay, I can see this guy, like, brutalizing somebody.
Oh, totally.
And so he wasn't necessarily acting. He was scary. But there was a surprising amount to like in this movie. You just had to kind of know where to look for it. I thought his character was pretty cool.
His character was cool, and also I have to say that one of my favorite lines in any movies ever is in this movie when the mafia guy's girlfriend comes out and she's puking in the thing, and then Fred takes her away, and she's like, I want you all the way inside me, or whatever she says.
Yeah.
Like her drunken banter, that is me when I'm drunk, and I don't get drunk very often, but that's exactly what I'm like. Yes, but the things she says are things that would come out of my mouth when I am drunk. So not that I should really be putting that out there, but I love that about that character, and I was sad to see her, get raped and killed, but it happens.
Well, and that honestly, that was something that kind of I was wondering how the female viewers would take that, because I found it very, again, sort of realistic to a point that it was like, again, that was one of the bits that was a little tonally jarring, because that was portrayed as serious, and it was done effectively as a serious moment, but it was just like, so is this, can't be fun? Is this serious commentary? What is it? Because I'm not entirely sure how to take it.
It took a break to be upsetting for a scene.
I guess so, but it's a little bit like the rape scene in Showgirls, which is incredibly camptacular, and then it takes like a really serious hard turn there, which again, like, if the rest of the movie had been played more seriously, then it would have fit in better. Or
Is someone typing something?
I think so, but like again,
Whoops.
like structurally at that moment in the script, like structurally, why it's there and what they're trying to get at, but it's just like it's how things are played that creates that kind of tonal shift. And so I was kind of curious how female viewers would take that,
Well, the first time I saw it, it was jarring, for me, especially because I was so in love with that character right away because she was so awesome. But I think, after seeing the film several times, it again, it adds to that juxtaposition where there are some really ridiculous moments, the visceral, serious moments, and I think it keeps me in the seriousness of the environment, like the homelessness and the seriousness of the characters' particular situations. And I think that something like that is not uncommon. Like I would imagine that stuff like that happens, and would happen in that, regardless of sort of the dark comedy aspect that is kind of
And it would probably
over the entire movie.
it would probably depending on what kind of person you are, if you're the kind of person who would just walk by a homeless person, not give them a cent, not give them a notice or glance or anything, or if you're the kind of person who would actually take like maybe 5 to 25 cents and get them a little bit each time. It all depends, what kind of person you are, So too, if you can get down on their level and help them out, I mean, of course, it's an insult sometimes if you give a homeless person a sandwich.
Well, I just felt like that rape scene was very it was very raw for me. So it kept me in that like, oh yeah, let's not forget this is serious, like this environment is it's not necessarily all fun and games. And these people really are, kind of crazy,
Dangerous.
kind of whatever. Dangerous. Yeah, that's a good
They
word
drag
for
her
it.
off like zombies, for fuck's sake. Like, they just
Oh yeah,
it's like zombies coming through the wall and getting you.
I was thinking that when
Totally.
they came up to the thing because they were all like drooling
and that's
You're
an aspect of horror there. I mean, for a woman, that's a very horrific, thing to imagine. That's
So
that's
let's talk
a
about that.
piece of
Would
horror.
everyone here classify this film entirely as horror?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, I would too.
Well, only in the sense that it's got people melting, because the rest of it, I mean, I guess you could call it a dark comedy of sorts.
exploitation.
Yeah, I would have thrown it in exploitation a lot more readily, if you even count that as a genre, because that can be subdivided infinitely. So I don't know if you count
you
that,
would throw
but
it in an exploitation instead of just the horror classification.
if you counted exploitation as a genre, then yes. Because again, like exploitation is such a really, really
That's a
relevant.
broad term, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's overly
Yeah.
broad, overly relative, and horror, you could make the argument is
Would
too.
you would you also put it in the sexploitation or
No,
because
I mean, no, it's. I think that
You have to have a problem to be aroused by this movie.
the women are, well, the women themselves are not really sexualized. They're preyed upon by sexual predator men, but it's not really portrayed as like a kind of fun, appealing thing. Like like a good example of that is like Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, or faster, like anything Russ Meyer, pretty much. If it's kind of shown like fun, kind of campy, appealing, all that stuff, which this really wasn't. So I wouldn't call it that.
okay. Alrighty. Did anyone else have anything else to add?
Yeah, I would. Oh, good.
But no, go ahead.
I say I would classify it as horror, but I would do a qualifier. I would classify it as 80s horror.
Yeah.
Which is entirely new, which is entirely different subgenre.
Yep. Totally its own thing.
Along the same
Yeah.
lines as something like Terror Vision or something like that, where it like Terror Vision, for example, is one that is horror, but it's not horror at the same time. But it's not quite a horror comedy. And I would say that would be where this kind of fits in that kind of aspect.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
I do agree with that.
Yeah, sure. I was a bit disappointed in it because I expected to see a lot more melting. Again, I thought because I'd seen the posters and the artwork for it, I'd seen like melted limbs and melted humans, and I assumed that that's what it was gonna all be about. I think in my mind I had something kind of like Maniac Cop for whatever reason
You
pictured
know
when
what's
I saw those
interesting?
posters.
What's interesting is that this director had some cinematography to do with Maniac Cop.
Sweet.
Oh.
I want to see Maniac Cop again.
That's a great movie.
It's even more relevant nowadays.
Yes.
I have to pick those up yet.
I just wanted to add that, I had spoken earlier about how much I enjoyed the junkyard setting, and I felt like they really did a great job working with the depth of the set.
That was
Like there's
set.
there's so much to see, like in every scene, just about. I mean, even in the liquor store. Like I remember when I was a kid, liquor stores, like these corner liquor stores, tiny, like narrow stores that were dark and dingy, and I just felt like there was so much depth in that, and in the junkyard as well, so much to look at. And that's, to me, that's what when I go to a junkyard, that's what it's like. There's so many like little things within, and when I was watching the bonus features too, they talked about how a lot of the stuff in the scenes was just made from stuff laying around, parts that were just scattered that they put together to make this scene. And that's totally my kind of art, that like found art and just making something out of nothing. And I really picked up on that, and I enjoyed that a lot.
Well, one thing I'll say with the junkyard is that it really looks like they shot someplace that just naturally looks like that, as opposed to, say, what you would see in like a big Hollywood production where you would either have to find a junkyard, but it would probably have to be a bigger one to accommodate that kind of,
Although I have to say the
like
junkyard,
larger size camera, larger crew, or like in a Nightmare on Elm Street, was it 3? Did they shoot in a real did they shoot in a real junkyard, or because that looked very manufactured to me?
I don't
know
know the answer to that.
I
Not sure.
want to say that
You
was a
get-
set. I'm
Yeah,
pretty
you
sure
get my
that was
point, though. You get my point that it always looks better when you can shoot in a place that looks naturally
authentic.
well, and it
I
looks
can-
naturally like what you're trying to get at.
I can
Well, and
think of
this
a
was an
junkyard.
authentic junkyard that they shot in, and they built like the tire hut and stuff like that. That was part of what they did to design the set, but they did shoot it in a junkyard. So
If I
think-
if I ended up homeless, I would want that junkyard tire home to be my home.
totally.
Right.
It was a nice
I
tire.
kind of just want to build one.
Well, it's nothing compared to Toxie's shack, though.
Right. I'm actually planning, hopefully I can get into a junkyard and they'll let me do it, but I actually want to do a photo shoot in a junkyard. I've been wanting to do it for like a year, so I just have to make it happen.
Wait for non-winter.
Well, correct. It will not be winter.
Maybe you can take take the inside of this little junkyard hut and kind of make a set that looks like it or something.
Well, my thought is to actually just go to an actual junkyard and just figure it out when I get there. I did a shoot in like the Walker's Point neighborhood of Milwaukee, where my photographer and I just went around looking for, just interesting backdrops. And we found, like, it must have been a building that was demolished and sort of turned into like a dumping ground, because there was like people had looked like dumped like mattresses and old furniture and like school books and weird shit. And we did a shoot there with the Allen Bradley clock tower in the background, and just all this garbage and graffiti and crap, and it turned out really good. And actually the picture that pops up for me here on Hangouts is from that photo shoot.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I
Oh,
don't.
cool.
I think you can see I'm in front of like a chain link fence. That was actually a different part of town. We moved then into the area where the demolished building was, but we called that shoot street trash and lollipops or something like that because I also had a lollipop in a lot of the shots. Um, but that
That's
juxtaposition again of
That should
a
be an
sweet
album.
thing, yeah, it should be. But yeah, I
That's actually
totally
really
am
well
inspired by that. I
Okay.
want to do more of that. So I'm going to find a junkyard. Hopefully that will let me go in there and take pictures.
Fun fact: that clock used to be the biggest in this hemisphere.
Oh, Alan Bradley?
Yeah,
Nice.
I know John Gerda.
You know him personally?
We
John
went
Gerda, the historian guy?
we went to lunch once. I think I got
Oh.
on his nerves though. Yeah,
I can't imagine how that's possible, Dustin.
it's a complicated story, but I had some connections when I first moved down here.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool. Alrighty. Did anyone else have anything else to add?
Were any of the characters sympathetic for you personally?
The main dude's brother, whose name I can't for the life of me remember, and the secretary, like they were the only really.
The only two that didn't do some fucked up shit.
Yeah,
other
they
words.
were the cleanest characters. Like
Yeah.
I hesitated to use that word because a lot of people were like dressed up with like dirt. But you know what I meant. Like they had no obvious like negative qualities like everyone else did. Like you wanted to see them live.
It's a little bit like in Meet the Feebles, which we should watch, how the characters who are the most good are the ones who are allowed to live, and the rest of them die.
So you would have wanted to see their romance blossom.
Well, we kind
for
of
the-
got that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't he supposed to be like an underage kid though?
Yeah.
I
You
thought
know
that
what,
was a
like,
little.
scene that
I
I
thought that was a
seen-
little creepy, personally.
He looked at least
in the
17.
first scene, he kind of at first reminded me of Ralph Mariachos or
Machio.
Ralph Macchio.
Ralph Macchio at first, but then as the movie went on, he didn't remind me of him again. But in the first scene, how he sounds and how he's talking to the Asian chick as when she gets real close to him at first and he wakes up, and when they're talking to each other after that little moment is when I got when I thought for a moment the young Ralph Macchio. But just for a brief moment.
Well, the funny story about that character was that I guess they had originally cast someone else, like a 17-year-old kid or something, and the parents were like, yeah, no. Once they saw the script of the movie, they were like, yeah, he's not in this movie. So they had to find somebody at the last minute, who was over 18 but looked like they weren't. And they found this guy, forget how they found him, somebody knew somebody or whatever, but
I almost felt like his voice was dubbed for some reason. I don't know why, because he's got such a high voice.
Yeah, I think the idea was to make him look as young as possible.
Okay.
Or to appear young.
Alrighty.
Well, like in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Alan Ruck was like in his 30s, and he's a high school kid. I mean, unfortunately, that's more common in movies than you would imagine. Except,
oh god, that's the joke of 80s movies. Like what Wet Hot American Summer. Have you ever seen that? It's like everybody in that is like 45 and they're supposed to be playing high school kids.
I didn't
that's
like
the
that
joke.
movie either.
That's the whole joke, though, that like in the 80s, everybody was 30 playing a 17-year-old. I mean, even Linnea Quigley in like, what is it? Night of the Demons, where she's supposed to be like a high school person and she's like clearly like 30.
Yeah. Yeah. Alrighty.
But
So,
it's key though. Like the larger point, it is key with certain kinds of movies that you either find the characters sympathetic, or if you don't, that you enjoy watching them. Yeah, like I think it was John Travolta on Inside the Actors Studio was saying he said something that I really agree with, which is I don't think you always have to like a character, but you just have to enjoy watching that character.
Yeah.
And I do think that's very true. Certain kinds of movies yield themselves towards necessitating sympathetic characters, and then other times it's just more of a character study kind of thing where you are able to just sit back and observe a type of person, and that can be really fascinating too. And I tend to like movies like that.
And I
In
felt
this,
like there was a lot of that in this movie too, for me.
there was, and I think there was again a little bit of both going on. But at least for me, the lines between those two things were not always terribly clear, in a way that they are in other kinds of movies.
Okay.
Well, maybe it's good to make you feel a little uncomfortable, Dane.
Well, I like feeling uncomfortable when I do. I think it can be a very it can be a really good thing for an audience to feel is uncomfortable, because
Just
I feel like,
imagine yourself naked in front of your friends.
yeah,
That's
well,
as uncomfortable as it can be.
Maybe this was more of like an itchy discomfort and less of a naked in front of friends uncomfortable.
maybe, but you know what I mean? It's like I feel like too often with most people when they watch a movie, they don't necessarily want to feel uncomfortable, but I feel like the point of art should be to shatter people's safety, their mental safety
Absolutely.
nets,
Well, and that's what horror is to me. Is
Yeah.
It pushes the boundaries, and it's like, with horror, it's always been how much can we get away with? How far can we push this? And will the censors let this by?
And
And
they've always
that's what
gotta have
inspires
a
my
fun
art.
moment, something to make you go, did they just do that?
Yeah. Well, and the master of that was, like I said before, the master of that was Kubrick, because he was able to not only push the envelope of the film medium, but was able to cover themes and concepts that were very shocking and different for their time, and
I have to disagree. I'm not a Kubrick fan.
I know you're not.
Actually, my favorite Kubrick film is Eyes Wide Shut, which
Love Eyes Wide
Mine
Shut.
I
is
hate
Clockwork
that
Orange.
movie so much.
Mine was a Clockwork Orange.
I love A Clockwork Orange.
That's like the only one I think is worth owning. Because I enjoy A Clockwork Orange, but I had to like see it 4 or 5 times for it to grow on me. All the other Kubrick movies, I've had that issue where it's like I see it the first time and I hate it, and I see it the second time and it's like, well, okay, I guess. And then with Clockwork Orange, I saw it a third time and I was like, okay, this is awesome. And none of the other Kubrick movies I tried that with did that work. Like 2001 is, well, I'll just use the story of Andrew again. So we were watching 2001, and he was like, this is so boring, I'm gonna go take a nap. And he came back like an hour later, and the scene that was playing was essentially the same scene as the one he left, and he was like, oh my god, it's still going. And it's like, yeah, I was bored too. I started reading a book. It was.
We will have to touch on Kubrick eventually. So
We will, because I don't know. He inspires me in many ways, and especially the ability to make a really artistically well crafted film that challenges people in every kind of way, like in terms of how you're used to receiving stories, the kinds of protagonists you can follow, themes that are kind of bleak, things like that. I really love people that are able to shock someone by making a really good film and making a great statement. A film that did that recently that the general audience hated, that I absolutely love, was Mother. That did that exact same thing. It presented a very unpopular, kind of shocking point of view in a really artistically rich way that was unsettling and disturbing for people, and I think that's wonderful.
I need to watch more Kubrick.
I can give you all kinds of recommendations after this is done.
Spartacus.
Perfect.
The one he disowned.
Spartacus was good. He didn't
think so.
that one's possibly that's one of my least favorite Kubrick movies. Not because it's bad, but just because it doesn't really feel like a Kubrick film, at least to me. It is good on its own, but it's so obviously a studio product, and it's not really a Kubrick film in the sense that we know it.
But actually, when talking about Kubrick and falling asleep during a film, just to run back real quick to the point that you made about the characters, about whether you like them or hate them, it's about more or less can
Shota has to go.
interest.
So, or Celeste has to go.
Oh, so let's just go.
All right. Good night, you guys.
Good night.
Right.
Bye. Go to Glamour Junkie shows because she does that.
Not anymore.
Oh,
Don't let Dustin be your PR person.
Yeah.
well,
He's not up to
You
date.
should still go though because the shows are still good. I'm just not there performing, but I will try to show up anyway.
support
he's not-
whatever
Thank you
Celeste
for
is
joining
doing.
us,
Watch
and,
Dead
have
Guy,
a
I
good
know.
There you
He's
go.
Vegas
not-
Star Coffin Classics. There
He's
you go.
not up to
Perfect.
date. He's not up to date because he hasn't downloaded Windows 10 yet.
Uh-oh.
All right. Good night, you
Oh,
guys.
you like
Good
Good night.
you freak? Yeah, not perfect. Not my real dad.
I'm glad for that.
Who's your daddy? No, just kidding. But anyways,
Make
I
me
think
false
I think that wraps it up for today. I think we had an interesting discussion.
It was good.
Totally.
Good time.
Why don't we?
And let it be said also that
Oh, we're still
there's,
live.
whenever there's disagreements, that it's not ever at the expense of those who did like it or didn't like it. It's just that's how we feel. But that's exactly why we have the discussions in the first place, is to share those feelings.
Well, your ardent love for The Exorcist and Kubrick has lowered the respect I have for you.
Well, let it be said that my respect for you could not be any lower.
Well, now
what
that
were you
we've
gonna
gotten
say,
that out of the way.
Brandon, before you got interrupted.
Oh, I was just commenting about characters and interest, because if you don't like the characters and they don't pull your interest, then all you're left with in the end is boredom, and that's to me really the essence of any type of thing. But
Whether you have a character that interests you or engages you,
well, not in this particular movie, which
well, just like in general, that's a important criteria.
that is an important criteria, is to have at least one or two characters that hold that, or
Yeah.
or have the ensemble.
Well, in any case, let's end the show so that we can. What? Why don't we start with Brandon? Where? Tell us a little bit about what you do and where you're from.
Yes. Well, I am Brandon Farmer. I am Septum Sen with Septum Sen versus the World. We are a channel dedicated to physical media. We do film reviews, we do pickup videos, and we do various vlogs. We did a tribute this week to or it's actually upcoming tomorrow. So for X Strike Studios, which is a very small group that did video game related movies, and in my opinion, some of the few video game related movies that were any good by any shape or form. So if you get the chance, check out the YouTube channel. We always have fun over there. Yep.
Long pause.
We're
Yeah, his stuff is pretty good. Go watch him.
just trying to take it all in, absorb the majesty of your statements.
Hey, my own picture was a natural capture. I did that. It was just a bad day. I didn't shave that day.
I wondered about that. And the pickup videos, is that you picking up grandmas from the jazzercise class?
There you go.
I thought so. I thought I saw you outside of there. You're trying to hit
What
on
were
the.
you doing there, Dane?
You were
Trying to pick up some grandmas?
You were hitting on my girl Louise, and I didn't appreciate it.
Sick
Louis.
fuck.
Made her late for a bridge club.
Alrighty. Katie, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you where you're from and what you do?
Sure, I'm Katie Cadaver, and I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm a body positive horror artist and alternative plus size model. And you can find me on Instagram at Third Eye Open. That's 3RDEYE0PEN. I am also the makeup artist for Milwaukee horror punk band Ratbat Spider, and you can find them at ratbatspider.bandcamp.com. I am also a Dead Girl for Dead Girls Dark Coffin Classics, and you can find Dead Girls Dark Coffin Classics on vimeo.com/DDCC. And I'm a performer and producer for Grindhouse Tees Burlesque, and you can find us at facebook.com/Grindhouse Tees.
Alrighty. Dane, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from and what you do?
I am Dane Kyle, independent filmmaker from Charlotte, North Carolina, and currently working on a whole bunch of different projects, most of which I unfortunately can't go into just yet. But rest assured that quite a bit of product is on its way for 2018. And please check out my YouTube channel, Facebook, wherever you can find me.
Alrighty. Dustin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do?
Hi, well, I attend University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and, well, I live in Milwaukee. I collect horror movies because I have no self-control, and basically anything else horror-related as well. I was on a shopping trip with Dave. He got to see it. It was ugly.
Oh, you got to see my addiction, hey?
Okay, that was worse. You were worse, but I felt bad. I spent like $20 I didn't have, and it's like, why am I doing this? Anyway, I show my horror stuff off on my Instagram, DHR Hunter, all one word. The idea is Dustin Horror Hunter. I need a better name. Send me better
Stop
names.
telling us that. Stop self-deprecating. It's fine. We love it. Keep going.
I'm fishing for different names. You're ruining it.
Horror Hunter is okay in certain counties in Nevada. Otherwise, it's illegal. Dustin, you ought to know better.
You should be headhunting.
Some people get confused. But yeah, so I'm gonna try to post more stuff on there.
Headhunter for shrunken heads.
Shrunken heads are hard to find. Like, do you have any idea how expensive a human skull is? God damn.
Like a real one?
Yes.
Just lop one off.
You can buy skeletons from like a medical supply house, I think. I don't
You
know
need
how
a
much it costs.
medical supply.
Fire. It's easy.
You need a medical supply. That's where you gotta go for that stuff.
I did use that in a project. But anyway,
no, just kidding.
So I was appointed editor of Inside Movies Galore recently on the blog, which is called Movies Galore, and I'm gonna have my first review come out ideally somewhat soon. I had a pretty big school project that I needed to handle, and I handled it this weekend. But now I'm behind on basically everything else. So I can't win. I'm dead.
No, you can't. So stop trying.
So, and you can often find me menacing Dead by Daylight on Xbox Live. So.
All right,
that's me.
And my name is David Strege. I run Movies Galore of Milwaukee, as well as write for Movies Galore of Milwaukee blog. And I run Inside Movies Galore here for this group of derelicts. And we have fun and enjoy shooting the shit about films. So definitely take a look out for Wrestle Massacre, which is coming out in 2018, which I am a producer of. So definitely check out some more film projects. I'm working on a few with Dane here, so let's see what he can come out with, and we'll go from there. So in any case, hopefully everyone enjoys this recording, and and has fun with it. We did. Alrighty, everyone say
I always
goodnight.
have fun. Good
Good
night, kids.
Night.